per capita wise.
You do have more black people who are poor than white people.
And
as a percentage.
Oftentimes,
why do you think that is?
Mainly because of the history of the United States, the discrimination that has happened in the past, the disadvantage that we were in the past. You know, we started so far behind in this race, so like there's only so far that as a collective we're going to be now.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 19.
19.
19 and a half.
So you believe that, let's say, a 19-year-old yourself.
Yeah.
You seem like a pretty articulate guy. You going to school?
Not right now.
Working in and out? I think you'll probably do okay. You seem like a pretty sharp guy.
Yeah.
You believe that at this point you are feeling the ripple effects from slavery in the history of the United States and that you face systemic discrimination?
I think there have definitely been times in my life and places that I've been where I have felt the effects. I think overall, I grew up in a very privileged family. My parents, they make good money.
You have both parents?
Yeah, and that's the other thing. That's also
far bigger than any other statistic.
Yeah.
Because when you take, that's something that I think is important, and maybe we could find common ground. When you take upper middle class white kids or black kids, they perform typically the same. When you take lower class white kids or black kids, they often perform the same. When you take any class of kids without a dad, they perform very poorly by all metrics available. As a matter of fact, if you want to avoid being in poverty, there are 3 things that you can do. It's very simple. Go to school, don't commit a crime, wait till you're married to have kids.
Right, so I want to hear your opinion on this. Why do you think that oftentimes more black children have to grow up in one household with families? I want to hear.
Can I speak freely without being accused of racism?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it goes back to the welfare reform, and it goes back to the Model Cities program. It goes back to a welfare state created that disincentivizes people from staying married. There's a financial incentive right now to not be married.
So if that incentive is there, why is it only happening to black families?
Because there's a higher percentage of black families who use welfare than white families.
And why is that? Because...
Well, at a certain point, though, you do have to end that cycle. There is a responsibility. Your parents chose to stay together, right?
Sure.
That cycle can only be broken through personal responsibility.
Yeah, but before we stray too far away from that,
sure.
Why are more black families on welfare?
But why were more black families not getting divorced? Why do they have stronger family households before the modern welfare state? In other words, blacks had a lower divorce rate. They had a lower fatherless household rate before the modern welfare state. We get it. Careful, there's a lot of connotations there.
Sure.
They had stronger family units before the modern welfare state. Stronger. Now, that was also sold to them from the Democratic Party. It was sold to them as something that was owed to them through reparations, right? This was a big part of. They targeted black areas and encouraged them to get on welfare. And then through that point, continuing through that end, they then created financial incentives to not be married. And at a certain point, I do believe when all rights are equal, since the 1960s, as far as the right to vote, when we're talking about the right to own property, redlining has been stopped, and there are systemic advantages afforded to minorities, not afforded to white people. There does have to be, considering that we know how beneficial and how much of a privilege, there's no greater privilege than being raised in a household with a mother and a father, that some personal responsibility does need to come into account. And that someone today who chooses to walk out on their wife has nothing to do with the Emancipation Proclamation.
What do you think the solution is? What do you think the end game is?
It's very tough to propose a solution because a solution can only come from the ground up through family units, through strong family units, through moral character and teaching people to stay with their kids. Because like I said, I think if we educate young people, white and black, listen, be responsible, don't commit crimes, graduate school, wait till you're married to have kids.
Yeah.
And that will change, that will generationally change. In other words, statistically, I think it's a 97% chance that you are above at least middle class if you do those things. It's not really rocket science. And by the way, that doesn't even necessarily mean that you need a higher education degree.
Yeah.
And no one talks about it.
Right.
And unfortunately, unlike our conversation here, which I think has been pretty fruitful, you know, often if white people say that, they're accused of being a racist.